Hi, folks. Thank you for coming today. I think I know most of you, but for those of you I haven't met, I'm David Eng, and I am the new faculty director of Asian American Studies. Yay! So, as many of you know, we celebrated our 25th anniversary this past year. And we did that with a lot of celebrations. In March, we had Viet Nguyen, the Pulitzer Prize winning novelist of The Sympathizer here. And then right after that, we had John Chu, the director of Crazy Rich Asians. And right after that, we had Alice Gu, the documentary filmmaker. Have you guys seen The Donut King? If you haven't seen The Donut King, it's an incredible documentary, and it explains why 95% of the donut shops in California are owned by Cambodians, and why all the boxes are pink, okay? So I was talking with John Chu, and he was like, oh, what's going on, for your anniversary? And I was like, oh, Alice Gu's coming. He's like, I love The Donut King. I saw it on the plane. I loved it so much, I optioned it. I'm making a narrative film out of it, all right? So run home and watch The Donut King. And then we capped off the celebrations with Cathy Park Hong, the poet and writer of Minor Feelings, An Asian American Reckoning. We brought over 350 students, alumni, colleagues, and supporters to our celebrations in March. And I have to say, in the midst of all that, we were also running a cluster hire in Asian American Studies. And in the course of 1 year, we managed to hire and double the size of the standing faculty in Asian American Studies. And so this fall, we're gonna have 3 new colleagues. We're going to have Hardeep Dillon, who is a professor in history and Asian American Studies. We're going to have Baki Mani, who will be a professor in English and Asian American Studies. I know she came to visit our class. I know you all loved her. And we're going to have Tazeen Shams in sociology and Asian American Studies. So, we've been focused on East Asia, and now we're gonna have this specialty in people working on South Asia, which is just great. And this semester, as most of our semesters, every single one of our classes is completely oversubscribed and full. So, to me, this moment is not the end of our expansion, but just the beginning of our expansion. And the Asian American students at Penn are finally getting the intellectual representation that they have been demanding and that they deserve. And speaking of intellectual representation, we're here today because of political representation. So it gives me enormous pleasure to introduce Councilmember Helen Gym, who is visiting us today and helping us to celebrate our 25 years. Helen is a double Penn alumna. She has an undergraduate degree as well as a graduate degree from the School of Education. If you haven't met her, every time I hear Helen Gym speak, I say to myself, David, you should have done better in science classes, because we need to clone this woman. We need 10,000 Helen Gyms, and we need to populate these clones on the local, on the state, and on the national level. Helen is a fierce advocate for progressive causes, for children and education, for immigrant rights, for affordable and fair housing. She is committed to social justice and to racial justice. And as you will see, she's also very committed to being very fashion forward, which we need. Sorry, I can say this as a gay guy. It's we need better fashion in this country, period, every single day. And if you guys are fans of Queer Eye, you go home, season 5, episode 5, the whole season set in Philly, And Helen Gym makes an appearance. She talks to a very committed and overworked environmental activist who needs a makeover. And you channel Toni Morrison. You say to the activists, I wrote it down, I can't remember the thing. You say, you said to her, your ability to free other people relies on you yourself being free. Okay, so we're at a moment now that Asian Americans are demanding to be represented. They're demanding to be free to be themselves at a moment of intense anti-Asian violence and hate. So I can't imagine a better advocate to be representing us politically at the moment than Helen. So before she comes up, I'm going to turn things over to my fabulous, fantastic, phenomenal co-director, another fashionista, Dr. Fariha Khan, who is a longtime supporter and friend of Helen, and she also has a few words. All right, thanks again for coming.
Great, thank you, David. Well, I feel pressure now for the fashion angle of things, but it's such a joy to be with all of you today, and thank you so much for coming. There's so much happening on campus, midterms and papers due, and so I really appreciate you taking time to be with us today to celebrate this really wonderful moment. So it's my real honor to be able to introduce Helen Gym, my dear friend. And so, many of you probably know, yes, as David mentioned, she's a Penn alumna. She began her career as a journalist and a teacher, right? And that's where a lot of the activism, I think, began for Helen. And so, but I want to give you a little bit of a more personal perspective. Helen is also one of the founders of the Philadelphia Public School Notebook, which was an amazing organization that disseminated information and brought families together to really think about education in Philadelphia. In 2000, Helen led a campaign called Stadium Out of Chinatown Coalition, which was against the construction of a baseball stadium. In 2008, again, she fought against the establishment of a casino and predatory gambling for our communities in Chinatown. In 2009, I was able to watch her work with students from South Philadelphia High as they fought against bullying. We were in PFP in Philadelphia Folklore Project together, and I was just in awe of her work there. And it was a joy to be able to present that together in an exhibit that came out. In 2016, as many of you know, Helen was elected as Philadelphia City Council. But soon after that, I had the amazing opportunity to stand next to Helen as she presented a city resolution on anti-Islamophobia against the Muslim ban when the person who was leading our administration happened to be around the corner, the president at that time. So that was incredibly inspiring to stand next to her at this moment when I personally felt so attacked, right? I knew that there was someone who was a light and would be, at my side against this. And I remembered so distinctly too, Helen, I don't know if you remember this, but at a protest at the airport when refugees were being turned away, Helen led a protest, and I was on the side and I saw her leading this, and I had to run, and she stopped the protest to give me a hug and it was such a moment where I felt deeply connected and not alone, right? And I think that's something that is important to remember about Helen, that she doesn't make anyone in our communities feel that they are struggling alone. And so, if you read about Helen, there's a term that comes up a lot, and I think it's really true, is unabashed, right? I love this term. And, I think it is a wonderful way to describe Helen Gym, unabashed in the recognition of her heritage as someone who comes from an immigrant family that really struggled, unabashed in her goals for the community, and unabashed in the dreams for all of us in an equitable future. So I want to welcome Helen Gym.
Thank you, Fariha. Thank you so much, David, and welcome everybody. I really wanted to continue the 25th anniversary celebration into another generation of Penn students who are going to be leading the way from 2022 into 2023 and beyond. I think, as David said, we wanted to make sure that the 25th anniversary is not just a mere marker of time, but a recommitment to the history of an Asian American Studies department that honestly had to fight tooth and nail to get to where it is today, and to bring young people like yourself along with an intergenerational group of individuals who were shaped by not just their academic experiences, but their personal experiences as being Asian American. So 30 years ago, I was a Penn student, and well, actually a little more than 30 years ago, darn it. So who's counting? 30 some years ago, I was a Penn student wandering around the Oriental Studies and East Asian Studies departments, trying to find stories about Asian Americans with history professors who would say things like, if you're interested in that, I recommend you go to sociology and try to develop your own course. So very, very dismissive at the time. And I think that a lot of my journey through my political life and community life afterwards was sort of a effort for me to find that Asian American home that I had often felt that I had lacked growing up in an immigrant family in the middle of Columbus, Ohio, which was great on a whole lot of levels because it had a lot of public services and a great public school. But in terms of race, felt very much like I was in a world of a black-white binary, with Asian Americans who just didn't fit in quite anywhere. And coming to Penn, I also was hunting, looking for community, trying to find it in different places. I ended up at the Daily Pennsylvanian and started to get to know a few of the original people who started Asian Americans United, also who came out of Penn, and we're hungry for something because we weren't finding it in a place, but we knew something was out there that was untapped. I was so fortunate that I ended up in a place called Asian Americans United. I was told that I had to go to this tiny little storefront in the middle of Chinatown in the early 90s, because that was a place where this woman told me there were people who were there to change the world. And I was like, well, that's a lot, but let me go find out what's going on. And, I walked into this small place and I met people who were generational activists. They had worked for SNCC. They were SNCC activists in the 1960s who had been jailed during the civil rights protests. We met people who had been active in anti-nukes and in protesting wars, especially in Asian countries who protested colonialism, who are active in the Hawaiian indigenous movements, who are trying to reclaim language and culture, who are on the forefront of the LGBT movement here in Philadelphia as Asian Americans. And they were transformative in their ideas. They talked about Asian American life like it was everyday life. Like it wasn't just about being Asian American and being in your narrow particular ethnic circle. It was like Kiyoshi Kiromaya, who is an AIDS activist, saying, are you on the internet? Because if we can communicate through the internet, we can change the world. It's people like Ed Nakawatase, who was that SNCC worker jailed in the 1960s who devoted his life to Native American, indigenous and sovereignty movements nationally through the American Friends Service Committee, who would talk about the importance of self-determination and indigenous rights and sovereignty in a colonialist country. And it was transformative education activists like Deborah Way or others who were dedicated in their lives to the influx of young people who are coming in post-Vietnam, into the city and transforming communities and public institutions, and most importantly, our schools. And in there, I felt like this tiny little, I don't even think we had 800 square feet to our name, but in this tiny little storefront, the whole entire world opened up. Yuri Kochiyama came through. Grace Lee Boggs came through. Activists from other communities and places came through and talked about land rights, about housing, about defending Chinatowns, and the importance of a vibrant, educated, and most importantly, fearlessness that comes out of Asian American communities, when almost everything told us that couldn't or wasn't supposed to be us. But I had my Asian American Studies classes through Asian Americans United and through this transformative community of Asian Americans across generations and genders, gender identities, who were actively in the process of making history. I'm so proud that you all are in Philadelphia, a place where Asian American communities have fought to make history, that this is not a story of a distant past or Nobel Prize laureates and Pulitzer Prize winners only. This is a story of everyday Philadelphians who defended Chinatowns against the largest corporate entities in the world. This is a story about Asian American high schoolers, immigrant high schoolers, taking on public school systems and narratives of tolerating violence or educational failures, who upended everything on their heads and made a city stop for a second and look their way and be able to hear them. It's a story of Asian Americans finding political voice and power, but doing so in a way that isn't just grasping at the ideas of political representation, but actually earning it and showing that when we do represent and come out of communities, that we can be an equally powerful voice for other communities of color in a united multiracial front. That is our task right now more than ever. And I think, as Dr. Khan said earlier, history comes to your door. In the moment that Donald Trump came into office and weaponized the powers of ordinary government, and we come into municipal local government, I came into municipal local government because not so much that I was looking for a title, but because I wanted to connect active Asian American and communities of color on the ground with a political mission out of City Hall to heal communities, to prioritize local issues, and to be transformative. But at the end of the day, when your federal government is wielding its power, we're damn well gonna wield ours too. Donald Trump can issue an immoral, illegal, unconstitutional Muslim ban at the airports, and he will be met by an equal force of the people who are living the Constitution and breathing it through their everyday actions. And in fact, that is the way that this country is forming. I want all of the young people, especially here, to recommit yourself to the idea that history is in the making, and the noise of the streets, the protests that you hear, is democracy in formation. And this idea that a new world is being born, sometimes at our darkest moments, is the belief of what drove Asian American studies through some of its darkest times. I'm here in part because of a community that believed that an Asian American studies movement had to be real. And after you study it, you go out and you practice it, you live it, you evolve it, and you become part of it, and you become part of history. And so, it is an honor, honestly, to be here at a stage when so many people can say that much of their work started in their earliest years, when they're reading their first books, they're remembering new histories, they're hearing about sovereignty movements and people who stood up in impossible times. That, to me, is the story of our Asian American history, not just a place of perfection and, awards and prizes and this top level. What I love about the Asian American Studies movement and its commitment here at Penn is that it's deeply connected to telling the stories of a broad swath of people. The people at the top are like the froth of a wave, but the power of that visibility comes through the mobility and the movement that powers a wave all the way from the middle of the ocean, which seems all placid and calm, until it crashes into shore and changes everything. That's part of the passion that you will feel from a lot of us who pushed for Asian American studies when we had very little idea of what it could be to where it is right now. And it is an honor to have both Dr. Fariha Khan and Dr. David Eng leading this department because I think that they bring that spirit of commitment to all of you. And that what we are trying to do here at the University of Pennsylvania is to make this program the most vibrant program in the country, that we want it to reflect the political and representational and the hunger and desire of Asian American communities, and especially young people right now, to be heard at a moment when voices of sanity and rationality feel very lacking. We need a multiracial commitment with Asian Americans committing themselves more than ever into a multiracial movement for justice, and whether that is fighting for justice at the UC townhomes, or whether it's demanding that this city and listen to the voices of Chinatown residents rather than billionaire developers who want to rename parts of downtown because they feel like they can. That is also part of an Asian American story, an Asian American movement that is happening at this moment, and that we all have a history that's led us there, a storyline and narrative that's been part of it. So I wanted to, do a small thing here today just to recommit ourselves. As David said, as Dr. Eng said, the 25th anniversary formal celebrations were last spring, but I wanted to be here at the beginning of a new academic year to say that that energy, that drive, that celebration, that purposefulness, I want that to drive this year more than ever. We do resolutions in our city council. I do very few of them. To me, they are a marker of history at a particular time. They, if written well, can tell the story of a Philadelphia that often doesn't get talked about or heard. Some members kind of abuse their privileges, in my opinion, but I use my work on resolutions dedicated to telling a people's history and a people's story. So I am honored to bring up Dr. and Professor David Eng and Dr. and Professor Fariha Khan up here today, to be now part of recognizing that Penn's Asian American Studies program, which has survived budget cuts and upheavals, but has reclaimed an honorable and important place in the Penn academic environment as a place of permanence, as a place of identity, as a place of intellectualism, and most importantly, as a place for activism and transformation of the university and beyond its borders. We're honored to say that this university is now part of Philadelphia history with the formal establishment and ratification of our City Council resolution honoring Penn's Asian American Studies program. This is the citation. We have the formal resolution coming. Yeah, formal resolution will be on display. But we wanted to say that you are history. This is not an Asian American story only. This is a Philadelphia story. And all of us, both whether we have been here for years or whether you are just here for the very first time, we are all part of that continuation. So congratulations. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you especially to our students. You know, you are our pride, and we are just thrilled that this program is in the state that it is to serve all of you, and we can't wait to see what you do with it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Helen.
Absolutely.
We have a minute for questions.
Will
I
you
don't
take
know-
questions?
Yeah,
Let's
is that
do it.
possible?
Yeah.
Does anyone have a question or comment or?
Small group, there's a recording, but don't ignore that.
Or thoughts they might want to share?
Hopes and dreams for the program.
That's okay. Sure, that would be great.
Yeah.
Ava, why don't you start?
Hi, I'm Eva. I'm from Councilmember Helen Gym's office.
Hi, my name is Jean. I'm the co-chair of the ASAM UAB. I also worked previously at AAU, so it meant a lot for you to kind of outline that history. And I also work at 34th Street, so it's really cool to kind of see like all the connections between campus and off campus, and your work in all of those organizations. So it was really nice to meet you, and thank you so much for being here.
Hi, I'm David Grossman, Director of Civic House and the Penn Civic Scholars Program, and I'm just happy to be here to support the program. And one of our Civic Scholars was Young as well, who's with Viet Lead, so we've had a lot of cross connections and students who work at AAU as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Annabelle, ASAM Program Assistant, and so thrilled that you are all here and we were able to see this amazing moment for ASAM. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Viraj. I'm the House Director for Harnwell College House. I'm also a graduate student in the higher ed program here. Longtime fan of ASAM, so really happy and excited to be here as well.
Hi, I'm Christiana. I'm a current junior. Not really sure what I'm supposed to say in my intro, but I guess so my involvements are I'm involved with APOL, which is how I found out about this event. Was meeting with Dr. Eng and Kong earlier today, and then also I'm taking an ASAM class this sem, which is really good.
Hi, I'm Yanji. I'm also a junior. I'm in a few of the similar activities as Christy. And I did have a question. I guess just for clarification, I know you mentioned, I know it was mentioned earlier that you did some work with preventing a sports stadium from being set up around Chinatown. And I know that in the ASAM class I'm currently taking with Dr. Pillai, one of the big overarching goals is to write an op-ed on the Sixers stadium that's being built near Chinatown. And I was just wondering if you could, talk a little about how you went about trying to prevent that construction. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Sure.
Hi, I'm Ben. I'm a graduate student at the School of Design doing city planning. I just want to come and meet the occasion of ASAM and to meet the council member as well. Yeah, glad to be here.
Hi, I'm Justin. I'm a senior in the college, and yeah, it's my first time taking an ASAM class this semester after, I guess, 4 years, right? So it's been great learning more about all of the initiatives that Penn and the community in Philadelphia has been involved in with regards to Asian American advocacy and everything around that. So yeah, it's been fantastic. So thank you so much for your time.
Hi, I'm Amory. I'm a junior at Penn, and I'm a native Philadelphian, so I really, really appreciate all the work you've been doing.
Hi, I'm Hitomi Yoshida from Penn Women's Center. We are partner of ASAM, and I'm also alumni of Grad School of Education, volunteer of Asian Mosaic Fund. That is a volunteer-run fundraising group that support Asian and Asian American communities here.
Hi there, I'm Rupa Pillai, Senior Lecturer in the ASAM program. Just a huge fan of you. Thank you so much for the work you do, and also thank you for offering the history, which is very important for us to understand as being present here in the city.
Hi, my name is Joyce Kim. I was here as an undergraduate from 2011 to 2015. I took both Dr. Eng's class and Dr. Khan's class, and it made such an impression on me that I'm now back as a second-year graduate student, a PhD student in higher education and sociology, and I'm interested in student advocacy, cross-racial student advocacy as it relates to ethnic studies programs and more faculty of color. So yeah, I think my time at Penn was really powerful, and it's been really amazing to see this movement. So I'm really excited to see what happens moving forward.
Hi, I'm Sophie. I'm a senior and a work study student at ASAM, and it's been really amazing to see how much the program has changed in just the 3 years that I've been involved in it. And so thank you so much for that history. And I also just wanted to say I really appreciate how tight-knit and robust the ASAM community is, especially with organizations and political unions across the city. And I think it's so special, and it's really exciting to see that grow even larger. I think I'm the last person.
And thank you, Sophie, because I know you worked, actually, some of these resolutions that are written are actually supported by communities. Like, it's not like I want to just write everything from my vantage point. So, Sophie, thank you for your work on helping work on the official city resolution. We appreciate you, and that's pretty cool. So, excellent. Thank you. Okay, so someone had wanted to talk a little bit about the stadium, and that's, it's a really important question because it's something that 20 years later we have a trajectory, but 20 years ago when it happened, everything was uncertain. 20 years ago in 2000, this was probably one of my first and earliest actions as a community person. I had been a teacher before and was doing, other smaller based things, but in terms of like the push outward of an Asian American Chinatown based fight and to make it a question about a city's priorities and its commitment to communities, whether or not they were Asian American, was our task. And 20 years ago, we had a brand new mayor, and they believed that, as many mayors sometimes do, that they want to stamp themselves on history through the building of physical structures, and many of them want buildings named after them, and stadiums, and that's me. I did that last. And so this, not surprisingly, this mayor wanted to lead with the establishment of a baseball stadium in what would effectively be, the slightly north part of Chinatown between 10th and 12th Streets on Vine to probably, extending close as far as you could go towards Spring Garden. And, at the time we were told, there was a big announcement. Major League Baseball came, including, I think, like commissioners and the head of the Phillies, the governor was there at the time, the city council members and many of the city council colleagues and big investors were also present. And they announced that this would be the place because it was the place where the least number of people lived. And we're like, hello, we're here too. And, I remember being at this official kind of announcement where, all the cameras are going and nobody's talking about Chinatown. They're like, well, how soon can it be built? How much will it cost? Will you require public money? And the answer was yes, they wanted to spend $1 billion of Philadelphia taxpayer money for a fully funded baseball stadium that would be open 82 days out of the year. And in the middle of this Philadelphia Chinatown. So we were caught by surprise. I think everybody kind of knew that this was going to be the announcement. And there was a lot of uncertainty. And the question was, what next? The complicated nature internal to Chinatown, as many would expect in an Asian American community, English language speakers were on this side, Chinese speakers, immigrant folks, Mexican folks who worked in all the Chinatown businesses way over here, residents over here. There was this kind of fracturing that was starting to happen even within communities. People were told, as they're being told now, if you participate, you'll get a community benefits agreement. We'll help pay for a Chinatown sports team or something. Do you guys need t-shirts? And maybe we'll, do some signage or something like that. And I think that one of the amazing things was that in 2000, Asian Americans United had been around since 1985. We were a pretty spunky organization, a little bit on the outside. We had long been excoriated because we had once protested Elaine Chow's visit in Chinatown. And to this day, there are people who still remember me for holding up a sign silently at that protest, but she was the highest ranking official within the Reagan or Bush administration. But she was responsible for, massive welfare cuts and, a whole back to work program and, all of this kind of stuff. So we very quietly, silently, and I believe respectfully protested her thing, but we were known as the group that didn't care, that here is this here's this high-ranking Chinese American who has come to Philadelphia Chinatown, and you guys had to show up and spoil the party. So we had a little bit of that kind of rumbling through. But we were also now been around for about 15 years. We had run a lot of programs. We had done a lot of services for communities. We were dealing with welfare cuts and transformation. This is pre 9/11, but doing still a lot with immigrants and community members. And we were just starting to have much more of a stronger base, but our biggest activism was around the public schools. We were a group of primarily teachers and educators who were coming together to talk about community revitalization through public schools, stronger families, and healthier neighborhoods. And so our strongest roots were around education. Philadelphia and Pennsylvania had the worst education gaps disparities between the wealthiest and poorest school districts, something which has only been widened in the last 20 or so years, as we've seen with a state level constitution lawsuit around fair funding. But we were determined to make the case that we felt like we couldn't win this fight, given all the political kinds of dynamics around it. We didn't think we could win this fight if it was a Chinatown story. If this was just a story of Chinatown saying, well, not us, go somewhere else, then that's actually not that compelling of a story. It's kind of it's an us, kind of noise thing. We wanted to ask the question that in the poorest large city in the country, in a place where we were deeply underfunding our public schools, should $1 billion of taxpayer money go towards games for boys and men and suburbanites, only open 82 days out of the year, in the middle and heart of a residential small business neighborhood and community that was seeking to grow and expand and deliver back to Philadelphia? Our task was, could we be the ones to deliver it? And, there was a lot of activism that the English speakers should be the ones to lead this charge and to meet with all the muckety-mucks and, do the whatever communications externally. But there was a huge effort that the power of our movement could not be defined by English-speaking Asian Americans who are trying to, kind of play a certain type of role around, that mediation between communities and to the outside public. It could only work if the people themselves believe that this is a Chinatown worth fighting for. So our task was really to go onto the ground, to organize community members, businesses, residents, and young people, and to call in people from outside of Chinatown to say that this is not just a place for residents, for the people who live within the specific borders of this, and this street, but that for Asian Americans, home is a place that is as much psychological, cultural, and historical as it is geographical, and that this was going to take on a much larger vision for Asian American communities than merely the people who lived within the boundaries of the impacted site. That struggle was really tortured. I will say at the very beginning, there was a lot of disagreement about the time spent with non-English speaking communities, with our Chinese associations, people pulling folks in, but the strength and the commitment and the power of the fight came right out of those communities. That those were the ones that felt more beholden, because there was nothing else, no other place where they could call home, where they could guarantee that they could have the roots that they would have. Once we started talking about other Chinatowns and what had happened to them after stadiums moved through, the power became even more clear. The Asian American groups moved in and out. Like, there were people who transferred in and out. People quit the campaigns. They were moving in and among different areas. But the Chinese immigrant community base that formed the backbone of Chinatown and the fight was undeniable and was the strongest aspect. It's the way we got a general strike. The first time all Chinatown businesses closed down and everybody poured out onto the streets and actually took over the Vine Street Expressway. It was the way in which the commitment that moved through Chinatown media, we didn't have it back then, but what would effectively have been word of mouth and social media didn't get undermined by sort of reactionary types of things, but became a clear, unified commitment to an immigrant neighborhood and immigrant voices that would drive the fight, and that the visibility would not be about certain anointed leaders, but would be about a mass group of people who could take on corporate entities and political power and make them actually bend the knee, to say that they don't actually have that kind of power, that they would kind of cower in the face of a united Chinatown. One of my very first, I'll say very quickly, one of my very first and most distinctive memories was the big protest at City Hall. And as I'm setting up and we're kind of doing all this stuff, there's just this doubt in the back of my mind. We're never gonna win. What are we doing? We're gathering 1,000 people and we're telling them what? We're gonna do what exactly? Because everybody's against us, the mayor, the governor, all of city council, it didn't matter why are we doing this? But I'm, organizing kind of behind the scenes, sort of the public nature of it. And then my biggest memory is we're kicking off and you have to do media and I don't know, we'll direct everybody to where they need to be directed. But one of our founders for Asian Americans United, and a woman who brought me and many other people into the modern Asian American movement, was Deborah Way. She was a teacher, she was a community activist, but in that moment, she was a folk hero. She basically stood up against these banners that were waving behind her, and her fist was in the air, and she gave a speech in Chinese and English that evoked a history of Asian Americans, a history of Chinatown, of people who said, we'll wait, they'll say that they'll do this for us, and they never did. They took away half of our land and a third of our housing. We waited while children got left behind in our public schools. We waited while elders wait for 20 years to get put onto senior housing. A city that can't see its own people is a city that has to be changed. And I think again, it was I was just gobsmacked. I just had no words. And there's 1,000 people and it felt like she was talking right to you. And it was that moment where, you know, all you could think of was like, let's just go. Like this is our moment to be seen and heard. And we wait for these moments time and time again. We labor in small meetings. We like raise our hands at polite little, you know, community groups. We try to study our books and, you know our history so we're perfect all the time. But that wasn't it. It was the ability to unify a large group of people and to be so clear in a moment when the whole world is against you, to say, we're here and we're gonna go. No matter what is ahead, what we know is that if we're unified, the world will change. There's no stadium in Philadelphia, Chinatown, as you know. And in its place was the building of a national blue ribbon public charter school, only at the time the second charter school in Pennsylvania to ever be honored with a National Blue Ribbon Award from the Obama administration. There is the headquarters of the Fujianese Association, the fastest growing Chinese ethnicity on the East Coast that relocated here from New York City after 9/11. It is the home of the annex for the Chinese Christian Church, which is the largest Christian church in the Delaware Valley. It is now home to the rail park and the reclaiming of green space and land. It is the home to Asian Arts Initiative, which I ended up being on the founding board of, and is also a vibrant part and parcel of Asian American life and culture, and home to small businesses and a walkable neighborhood. And in 2022, Chinese Americans in a fast-growing decade for Philadelphia became 5% of the census population, and now, as a result, is an official language on the ballot of the city of Philadelphia. That is not by accident. It had nothing to do with like natural, immigration or movements. It was a purpose. 20 years ago, when we fought that stadium, we made a statement to the nation, but most importantly to ourselves, that we will grow this city. We will prove that when we invest in neighborhoods and communities, that the well-being of the entire city of Philadelphia will grow, and that people will remember and see us in a way that they had never done before. We had no idea that was gonna happen 20 years ago. Mostly people said, that's an abandoned area. You don't have anything to do. What do you wanna do with it? Also, why do you hate baseball? Because it's an all-American sport. And we're like, well, we're gonna show you who are the real Philadelphians and who's gonna grow this city. I want all of us to make that commitment to ourselves, that we don't know what the next 20 years brings, but if we have a vision for what a healthy city and community looks like, we will find our way there. But it won't be by one struggle, it will be a commitment. When we won that stadium battle, we didn't win the end of a stadium. We won the beginning of a Chinatown on the rise. And I hope that that is like an Asian American story of Asian Americans rising as well. So I know that was long, but I appreciate the question. And then we'll eat, because there's always good food. Yeah. So I would say that, one, thank God that they invested in Asian American studies and in a more diverse university. The university needs to be on the front lines in a city where we often face the biggest problems in the world, the university should be trying to lead the solutions to the problems that we face. We can actually do that right here. As terrible as some of the things that we're seeing right now, they are not unusual. They are happening all the time to communities all across the country and all across our city. We just may not hear about it because it may not be in Penn's backyard. But the point of getting it right now and being on the effort to remedy injustice and to commit yourselves to individuals who are not in positions of power right now is because we are seeking solutions for things that are being perpetuated by current power structures we can't get out of if we continue on with those current structures. We have to change the way we are looking at how people live in our city, how people live around Penn. I often say, if this is a city that calls itself an eds and meds city, then we should not be the city with the biggest educational and health disparities in the nation, in our own borders. And Penn has to commit itself to doing that. Penn is starting to do some things which I think are really important. I think a lot of it has to do with its student movements and its faculty that are pushing the university towards change and a more vibrant Philadelphia that's also doing it. Penn's medical team, for example, is working very closely on housing and linking the efforts around healthcare to housing. That's an important link, and that Penn, with multiple amounts of real estate and its investments in this West Philly area, has a huge opportunity and a responsibility to support its healthcare mission and its along with that housing vision that could be a solution. I think that there's no question that Penn has very recently, because of student pressure, has committed itself to effectively the first pilot since 20 plus years ago, which was a $100 million investment made last year into the Philadelphia public schools to remediate on lead, asbestos, and mold. That is $100 million over 10 years. So to me, it's a bit modest, but we'll say that it can be a start. And I do hope that the young people who are here in part at Penn because of your educational background, could commit to also making sure that other young people, especially in the West Philadelphia area where we see so much disinvestment in education, to make it a continued priority for all of us. It's deeply, deeply needed. But what can Penn do better? I mean, it is the premier institution in West Philadelphia, and this is an area where we have new political leadership locally. And what we want to see is Penn's mission being in greater alignment with the health and well-being of the residents and the overall vision of West Philadelphia, rather than just Penn's personal health within its own borders. It is easy to become a place of excellence when you put up the gates and you pat yourselves on the back and you reinvest all the dollars in and around just this area. It is very hard to deliver a message that your excellence raises everybody else's quality of life. And that is Penn's biggest challenge, because stepping right outside of Penn's borders is the difference in a life expectancy on Penn's campus versus off Penn's campus that could be decades, like decades, between the difference of a young person's life right now on this campus between the ages of 18 and 22 versus the difference of life expectancy for a young man 7 blocks away from here to our west from 18 to 22, dramatically different. Dramatically different. And it cannot be Penn's existence to allow that to be a continued process. And not to make it disappear, not to push people out, but to raise up people's lives. That means a commitment beyond Penn's borders and to commit Penn to the broader health and well-being of the city of Philadelphia. I think that Penn can do a lot more. I think all of us probably in this room will agree with that. And I even think the Board of Trustees would agree with it. But I think more important than just doing more is the idea that Penn needs a vision for itself where its future is tied to the health and well-being of West Philadelphia and Philadelphia overall. Not just that it itself should be charitable or kind or thoughtful or do this as part of its, community, services structure, et cetera, et cetera. To be transformational, you yourself must change, and that the investments must go outward. So I think that is Penn's challenge, but I believe that the Asian American Studies Department is going to be part of that commitment and part of that process to see that change moving forward. So thank you. Thank you, everybody. Asian food, the best food ever. So we should definitely talk more over hors d'oeuvres and treats.